On this episode of NorCal News Now, we're speaking with Saulo Londono, the chair of the Butte County Republican Party. And Saulo joined us a few months ago to talk about the 2018 midterms, the race for governor, and more. I'm your host, Mike Richman.
And I'm political consultant Aaron Haar.
You are. You're looking good, man.
Oh, thanks.
Your hair looks very nice.
Oh, yeah.
Wavy.
Yeah, well, we decided to try not to do the hat.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, the cowboy hat didn't come in on Amazon. You know, Amazon's taking a lot of heat right now, so I'll stay away from that one.
They are. All right, well, this is a bit of an unusual episode, as I mentioned. We recorded it in June after the primary. We had Saulo on, and in that time, we had a little summer break. Our staff cut some of the more dated stuff out of the interview we had with Mr. Londono, and we turned it into our first fall episode that you all are going to see here in a few minutes. So it really kind of gave us an opportunity to use as a preview for what's coming up here in November. And Saulo's a really sharp guy. He's got a lot of good perspectives for a conservative, and we had a fun time talking with him. And it's kind of also a little bit of an interesting kind of snapshot in time for this kind of, I guess you could say, crazy era that we're in. Londono's observations are really interesting and engaging on some of that stuff, gas tax, some other things we talked about. Yep. It's interesting to see how much has really changed just since then, from June to now.
It moves quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great summer. It's been a crazy summer, all the stuff that's happened. I mean, John McCain just passed away, and at Helsinki, we have a lot of legal stuff. I mean, what's been the takeaway?
Guilty verdicts.
From guilty verdicts. What's been the takeaway for you this summer?
I think the big one was John McCain. Yeah. I mean, really, this is the end of the Republican Party, I think. I think that's it. And here's a man who, all of a sudden Republicans fell out of favor with. This great American hero, this great American story, and suddenly he's not good enough for the Republican Party. A lot of Democrats too, a lot of progressives, not really. We're kind of honor the dead here, and still taking shots at John McCain after he's gone. One thing about John McCain is he was somewhat flawed in some of his politics, and the great thing about John McCain was that he admitted that. Yep. He was very okay with admitting when he was wrong, and I think you'll see in the eulogies and in the things coming out next week of wanting to solidly put in that message of where the Republican Party has gone wrong. Under Bush, they were looking for that minority vote. Yeah. They were searching for it, and all it took was a President Obama for them to lose their soul and start to attack that minority position and use it as a political favor. And it's that type of governance, not governing in the center, not governing the people, but governing from a party perspective, is the country we're living in right now, and it's a more dangerous country than it was under other presidents. Do you think that, in your opinion, did John McCain die as a man without a party? That's a tough one, and I don't know. I don't know how he felt. I would think that maybe that's how he felt. Is that the party left him? He didn't leave the party. Well, absolutely. The Republican parties were never for tariffs. They were against tariffs. They were absolutely against tariffs. Going from the founding of this country, they were against raising the debt, which is skyrocketing right now under this tax bills that they've been passing. He is a person who understood sort of the quality of life from being in Hanoi Hilton and coming back from that and not having certain luxuries that others might have, Donald Trump included. Right. I mean, can you imagine Donald Trump in Vietnam? No. He, where's my golden Jeep to take me to the front? Well, I mean, but you're right. I mean, you talk about the change in that party. I mean, we talked about it on the show. If you go back and you look at the debates that Reagan and Bush had, the one moment that we talk about where Reagan and Bush were talking about immigration reform in 1980. Absolutely. And where would that debate have a role in the Republican Party today? It's really disgraceful because we are a country of immigrants. We've always been. And to add a little more to that, the eroding and the of the institutions, not only the Fourth Estate and the media, but free press was something that Republicans were always for, but the FBI and the agencies that are set to protect this. You hear a lot from the Republican, Blue Lives Matter, but but not when it comes to the FBI or agencies. Those are known as the deep state. Those are known as these terrible institutions meant to erode it. So it is a disgraceful, for what Trump is and everything else. I think the more of the disgrace to me is the Republican Party and those voters who sit okay with that sort of thing. And you see it in Florida, and you're going to see it in Florida. Democrats are in a fight right now of whether they try to win from a middle message or whether they try to win from a message more to the left.
Yep.
And take kind of a cue from the Tea Party. A lot of Americans don't like centrist Democrats. They don't trust them. They think they're, an elitist camp, and they want to see more ideas coming from a place of empathy and a place from the hard left, and measuring, governing from that center is just saying, well, I lack enough empathy on these certain issues.
Well, from both wings, has the age of a party, is that going away as it is for both parties?
No, I don't think so. I think there's reform happening in the Democratic Party. You're seeing that in California very much, but you're also seeing it in the National Democratic Party. They just got rid of superdelegates. Taking away some of their power. Some people think that's anecdotal at this point. But you see people in the Bernie Sanders wing of the party being very happy with some of the reforms coming up, and it's looking like it is possible to reform a party. Whether the Republican Party has been reformed into an anti-immigration, tariff-happy, against some sort of civil rights in this country. We heard a Republican congressman come out today saying only property owners should be allowed to vote. So this is getting to the point where you saw Republicans like John McCain, Jeff Flake, and others stand up and try to send the message that their party was being taken over. I think now, it's a little too late. I actually work with quite a few Republicans, and a couple, they think that the environment is being intentionally destroyed by liberals in order to make money off climate change. So when you're dealing with this sort of rhetoric that is basically placed in their minds from right-wing media and right-wing wingnuts, that's a hard place to be, and we have to figure out how to let them know that Bonanza's not coming back on the air. The pet rock, although it was a good idea, it's just not the world we live in anymore, and we have to, kind of change with the times.
Well, we're going to be doing it here this summer. We're going to be bringing it to the folks out there, all of you, this summer and fall. Got an election coming up in just a few months. Getting back to Saulo Londono, we're going to have him on here in a few minutes. You're going to see that interview. We think what he's saying is valuable. We think it's interesting and insightful, and we're really happy he was with us. He talked about a lot of things. He talked about gubernatorial candidate John Cox, the surprising local elections involving Deb Lucero, defeating Larry Wall for the Butte County Board of Supervisors, the impact of California's system of only the top two, the jungle primary, how that plays out, and a lot more. So we're going to be taking a look at this interview with Saulo Londono right now. So Chris, go ahead and play that tape.
The statewide results there weren't many surprises in my view. There was not really any Republican running a well-coordinated and well-run U.S. Senate campaign, so it wasn't a surprise for us that nobody sort of jumped out to make the top two against Dianne. We were pretty sure that John Cox was going to win, not win, but win the Republican primary per se. So that wasn't much of a surprise for us here in the county. We did endorse John after the last time that we spoke. I believe a few days after that, the president jumped in and said, John's my guy, and a lot of folks here in the county, started calling me and saying, hey, let's do that. Let's get behind John and see if we can carry him through. And that turned out well. John Cox received the vast majority of the vote here in Butte County, so we weren't that surprised to see that, and we're looking forward to that conversation. I want this to be a campaign about the real issues in California. I think John and Gavin have already had a phone call where they talked about how they're going to focus on the issues that matter to the voters, not on any of the salacious stuff that folks kind of frown upon, and I think that's fair. I think the California voters deserve that. So
you think John Cox will be up in Butte County at some point this season?
Yeah, he made it a point to come up here quite a bit during the last few months of this campaign. So I would expect that now he's going to turn that dial up to 100 and start visiting a lot more areas of the state that he's going to need to carry in order to win. But I expect that we'll see him at least once or twice up here. And some of the surprise, I think that most people were surprised to see some of the local elections go the way that they did. Me, not so much, because I was following the absentee ballot returns on a daily basis with the county clerk's office, and I saw that in those two specific supervisorial races, in the Maureen Kirk seat and the Larry Wall seat, the Democrats were turning out strongly. And Maureen's seat already being so weighed heavily against a Republican winning in the first place, it just wasn't looking good during the absentee ballot process. So, but the seat that Larry Wall carried for many years is one that I was hoping that we could still hang on to, and that Larry could sort of squeak through. And election day really took that away from him. I think I think when it came down to the absentee ballots, it was pretty even. Larry and Deborah Lucero were about, I think, 80 votes away from each other on the first numbers. But then those election day votes started coming in, and it was pretty clear that both Deborah and Tammy Ritter worked really hard to get their voters out. And I tell VIT candidates all the time, it's grassroots politics. It works. Go knock on those doors, make those phone calls. I haven't seen any numbers from Tammy's campaign, but I'd assume that they probably knocked on thousands of doors. Yes.
So looking at it strategically now, I want to go back to the gubernatorial race, because it was interesting. I think the way that, and we did talk about that, you and I, last time you were here when we had Aaron too, with the Cox and Allen thing. I mean, yeah. I said on the coverage we had on primary night that I felt strongly that Travis Allen was a really good candidate. And I as was John Cox on the Republican side. I spoke to a lot of Republicans. I have Republican friends and family members. And Travis Allen was very popular. And I feel in my bones that had Trump's endorsement gone to Allen, I think we'd be talking about Allen facing Newsom in this race.
John Cox was polling pretty strongly before Trump's endorsement. The response that I saw from the grassroots was that those that were on the fence between John and Travis, that did make a difference, but there were not that many that were on the fence. And that's just an anecdote, right? That's my experience as a county chair and somebody who works in campaigns. For every 10 Republicans, I'd say there were maybe 2 undecideds, and maybe those 2 did swing based on the president's endorsement. But I feel like the state party and the local party and President Trump probably allowed both of the candidates to go out there and present their case to the voters, and President Trump probably looked at the support that they were receiving, the trends. I think is the most important, is which candidate has been trending up and down, and I think he made the decision with his staff and in communication with both of the campaigns that John not only had the best chance of making the top 2, but possibly taking the fight to Gavin in November too. Probably the reason why John was polling so well was because his message was so consistent about the economy and about creating results for the people of California that have been struggling for so long. Whereas Travis's message was very sort of aimed at the grassroots, aimed at the Trump voter, and Trump is not necessarily a very popular guy in California.
Well, then help me understand something about this, because I mentioned the gas tax, which is certainly is a big anvil that the Republicans are hitting, that they hit in the primary, and they're going to continue to hit, I think, pretty hard going forward here. And help me understand it, because I don't know that I understand this well, and I need some education on it. This tax can only be used for transportation, correct?
Well, that's the plan, according to Democrats, is to make it so that this tax can only be used for transportation and
but that could include like high-speed rail.
Right.
Okay.
So that's another layer to it, right? And first of all, we don't there's that we spoke of trust last time I was here. There is not that trust already that this will be only spent on transportation, and even then, that doesn't mean roads, right? That means transportation. We know very well what Governor Brown would like to do with some of that money and completing his high-speed rail trend. So,
anything Newsom is just going to continue along in that
I don't
same
know.
path? You don't have a sense for
I
that?
don't. The little that I've seen from Newsom doesn't really show that he's got the heart to sort of carry this mission on the high speed rail or the Delta tunnels. But don't quote me on these things. I just don't see Newsom's message to be that he's going to carry Jerry Brown's legacy. I think some of the Democrats' frustration with the governor has been that he may not be as progressive as the party in California is today, and I think you see some of that with the U.S. Senate race as well. So I don't know. I don't know that Gavin will be carrying the torch on the high-speed rail and the Delta tunnels, but I do think that issue of where's this money going to go is one that resonates, and it's not, and it doesn't come from anywhere. It comes from experience. I see a lot of folks just saying, well, we need the money for the roads. I mean, what do you guys suggest?
Right.
I mean, we suggest using the money that was there for the roads instead of using it for other things that they decided to use it for. So
you personally now, I'm not even sure I know what is coming up for you in November. I mean, you're certainly going to work to help support John Cox.
Yes.
Here in Butte. What are the other races that you're going to be involved in that are going to be November races?
Well, I really focus locally, so I will, we'll really try to help do the best we can to turn out the vote in all of the North State, not just here in Butte County, but sort of Butte County being sort of a political center of political activity here in the North State. We see it as our responsibility to drive turnout for the Republicans all around the North State.
Okay.
So that'll be one of our main goals. But I look locally at the races for city council and mayor in Oroville. We look for the races, and certainly the 3 seats that are up in the Chico City Council are going to be some of our biggest focuses. So you'll
and John Cox, of course.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, John Cox and any of these other constitutional offices, statewide constitutional office that we could possibly, we have Mark Muser, Secretary of State. I think some of the most interesting races that we'll see are some independents, right? Steve Poizner, insurance commissioner, Marshall Tuck, superintendent, and those ones we won't be necessarily involved in those because they're not Republicans, but we'll be working to turn out the vote for our favored candidates on all of those races, and but in particular we like to focus on the local stuff. The donor community here in Butte County wants us to focus on the local stuff, and we've done a pretty good job of explaining to the grassroots here in Butte County that this is the stuff that matters the most, right? You're going to be way more impacted by what the city council or the board of supervisors will do than a vote that the U.S. Senator takes in Washington, D.C. Right. So we want to make sure, that we turn out the vote for Congressman LaMalfa and Senator Jim Nielsen, Assemblyman Gallagher. These are all guys that are considered to be in safe seats, but we don't like to get complacent. We want them to win the vote in Butte County and continue to represent as well. So all of that. I don't want to make it sound like it's all encompassing, but we have strategies to help turn out the vote for each and every single one of those guys.
That's interesting to me because that is so on the primary there in that assembly seat, Gallagher seat, there were more than 2 people running. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but was it just Sonia and Gallagher running? Okay, so if it's just them running, this is just kind of a warm up, right? I mean,
it's a warm up, right?
Or does Gallagher? Is there a threshold at which if Gallagher would win? No, it doesn't matter.
No, on those state offices, there is no threshold. The top 2, the way that the 50+1 per se, it doesn't apply.
So if there are just 2 people running, Yeah, it's just kind of a do-over. Right?
warm-up.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
like it's a warm-up. You just, kind of get your message out there and you see how it plays, and then you adjust from there.
Right.
But Gallagher having won a pretty strong majority there, you figure you don't want to get complacent, as you say, but you'd figure that he's probably in pretty good shape there.
Yeah, well, we like to treat every opponent of these guys as a formidable candidate and give them the respect that they deserve as being, representative of the electorate that we represent, as well as the assemblyman and the senator and the congressman represent all of Butte County, and not just the ones that vote for them. So,
and given again what we just talked about, how important it was to have Cox at the top of the ticket there. I mean, it would have been, I would assume, nice for you guys to have somebody going up against Dianne Feinstein, even though that's a fairly safe seat. For most Democrats would look at that and say, well, it's probably not a seat that's very vulnerable. But were you disappointed that the National Committee didn't put more resources into that race?
Well, I think the National Committee and the state party, they react to what they see on the ground. We can't create candidates out of thin air. So, the frustration that I heard from a lot of Republicans is that, in our view, there were too many good candidates running against Kamala Harris 2 years ago, and just not enough this time around. So we had the opposite problem where, we split the vote in a very, non-strategic way, 2 years ago, and we ended up with Kamala Harris and Loretta Sanchez. And then this time around, the party found it hard to find anybody running a very traditional, strong Republican campaign. So, if I believe the gentleman that caught the most support was
James Bradley.
Yeah, it was CFO, and I think Republicans were really just reacting to the title.
And James was pretty close. We know James. He's been on the show as well.
Yeah.
He really ran pretty darn tight against DeLeon. I mean, it was, I think, 2 points.
Yeah.
It was like 10 or maybe a little bit more, but it was close.
It was close.
It was really close.
So we were hoping, but we weren't extremely disappointed because it wasn't a situation where the party got involved all that much as just a result of consequences.
One thing I think about a lot here in California, and I think about it nationally too, but I think about the extremes of the parties. And I think about, the Republicans sometimes will, in my mind, tend to go a little too right. I don't like ultra-conservatism. I don't like ultra-liberalism either. I'm not a believer in socialism. I'm not a believer in ultra-progressive notions either, where a lot of things should be free. Kevin DeLeon is known to be fairly progressive in a lot of his belief systems. Do you think that was, I don't want to use the word repudiation because it's a pretty strong word, but do you think that there was a message sent that Dianne Feinstein, who's very much more centrist and had 4-1 of the votes, do you think that was a message, or was it just more about her as an incumbent and people just feeling more comfortable as Democrats checking the box for Dianne?
Right. No, I think if you were to start a candidate fresh from zero and it wasn't Dianne, that candidate would, with the same message that Dianne has, that candidate would have had a lot more trouble. I think the party, the Democratic Party here in California, has moved pretty far left, and DeLeon probably does represent the party.
But he only got a quarter of the vote she got, though.
Yeah, and I folks really like Dianne. I mean, even as a Republican, there are folks that don't dislike Dianne. They think she's, as you said, she's been pretty good on certain issues. I think no Republican, is going to start praising her on some of the social issues they disagree with her on. But
she's not Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where she saw some of the and with that said, some of her positions have evolved over the last 6 months. Now that she saw, Kevin DeLeon and sort of as a representation of how the party has moved over the past years, and she evolved on marijuana. So it's I don't think it's necessarily a repudiation of the progressive nature of the Democratic Party. I think a lot of voters still just really like Dianne and are loyal to somebody who's been there for all those years and has the background as she did and where she came from, and sort of being a liberal heroine for them. So I don't see her losing in November.
I would imagine not. I mean, DeLeon would have had a better showing, I think, if she was really a threat. But who knows? Things can change.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit more about you, because you have an interesting story, and we didn't get to it last time on the show. The thing with Jon Stewart and Crossfire.
Oh, right.
Where you were at that show, and it was one of the last. I guess, was it the last episode of that?
No,
show? It wasn't the last.
It wasn't, and it was a couple years apart. It just felt like that way because it was shortly after, in my mind, that I went to go to a taping of Crossfire that the show came to an end.
Right.
And this is just as at the time as a high school student.
I was gonna say you're a young guy.
Yeah, I was a young guy,
Yeah.
and I was always pretty interested in the back and forth and in the, my when I was speaking to your producer about this, I look at that with a heavy heart because Crossfire was my favorite show. I think it was much in the mold of some of the shows in the past, these debate shows that in which you can see have somebody from the left and somebody from the right, and sometimes it's not even left and right. Sometimes it's just one side of the issue versus another, and I'm somebody who's watched almost single episode that's been put on YouTube of the firing line.
Oh yeah.
Dating back to 1966. For anybody that wants to check it out, still on Hoover Institute YouTube channel.
That's right.
And you can go and watch it. And that's the type of I have every single one of my interns who takes an interest in that stuff. Go watch it. Not just for the level of discourse that I think is really what's remarkable, but also because these issues repeat themselves.
Absolutely.
And if you go back and you watch the debates that were taking place in 1968 in that show, and you see you sort of fast forward to the debates that we see today, it's uncanny, some of these issues, right?
It is.
So yeah, for me it was one of those shows that you could learn so much about where both sides stood, and it seemed very fair. Like you had two on the left, two on the right, and then you had a discussion and sort of a head-to-head battle, and they were respectful, and sometimes it got a little out of hand, but for the most part they were for me just the purest form of discourse that you want to have in America. And I do feel like discourse has deteriorated over the years. I don't think it was because Crossfire went away, but I see it as a symptom of what happened, which is, and this is where I, going to the negative of these comedy shows and Jon Stewart, which I think, and many people disagree with me. So just putting that out there, even my good friends, don't like when I talk about this, is that I just think it's done a very poor service for America, that it's created a level of cynicism in public discourse and the media and journalism that has gotten us to where we are today. Now, I don't blame them all for it. I don't think that's just the fault of Jon Stewart or Stephen Colbert and whatnot, but I think a generation of kids, I was in high school back then, and a lot of the folks that I grew up with grew up learning that MSNBC and Fox News and CNN are just these trashy tabloid type of news shows but come to our comedy show to really learn about the real issues, and it's always very, very convenient for them to take off their comedian hat and then put it back on when it's time to be funny, but then take it off when it's time to grill somebody. But then if they caught it being a hypocrite, I was just being a comedian. Like no, and that's why you see you look back at 2000 and the level of the public trust in the media was at 55%. I looked it up, and now it's at 25%.
Yeah.
Now, I don't blame them all for it, but I think, between, and I agree with Paul Begala about this, by the way, because Paul was interviewed about this after the end of the show, Crossfire, and he said, Jon Stewart didn't want these to be a left and right, exposing their views type of thing. We should really just bring in experts to talk about these issues and to teach or to lecture the non-desirables of how they should think, right? And I despise that, and I think that you see that
it's disrespectful to the rank and file. I mean, people can make up their own minds, is what you're saying. You don't need to be lectured to by some expert who thinks he's an expert or she's an expert at something.
And I think that we're seeing a right now a backlash to not experienced, but the experts, right? I mean, a lot of people are just done being told by the experts to just hang in there. It's fine. It'll be okay. And well, as their community deteriorates around them, they go, no, we want somebody who is going to shake things up. And then we got that President Donald Trump. And, discourse in America is at an all-time low, and it's hard to have a conversation about politics with anybody these days without becoming a food fight.
No doubt. You have to really, if you want to engage in it, you've got to be very patient. Yeah. You've got to almost go over the line of being, okay, I'm going to be really conciliatory.
Right. And
then draw them in and begin to have a conversation. But it's hard to do that because it's passionate stuff. But what you're saying is interesting because as I was listening to you talk about this, it came to mind because from the left, I always hear people say, and I've even said it myself, well, all talk radio is right. All talk radio has kind of a right-leaning bias, right? You don't have a lot of left-leaning, it's a podcast, but you don't have a lot of left-leaning talk radio that's, syndicated, that's really popular.
Right.
And if you think about it, actually, kind of the comedy shows, the evening comedy and comedy talk, comedy/talk/news is all kind of left-leaning. So it's like, or a lot of it is.
Yeah.
So maybe what we need left-wing talk radio hosts and right-wing comedians to kind of join forces and come up with a show that, offends everybody.
Or just go back to having, a discourse show. Gavin, I believe there's now
what? We can do this one, people. Anybody who wants to pick us up at CNN, Fox, we'll take it.
This type of stuff, frame the issue, let one side speak, let the other side speak, and let them decide, what they believe and do their own research and et cetera. That's been lost, I think.
Well, I'll tell you why. I know why. It's not hard to know. If you're anyone who's in the media, and those of us that are in the media, your hearts do break a little bit for the idea that the rank and file, the users, we call them users, readers, viewers, don't trust us, don't trust media. That's heartbreaking.
Sure.
Because when you make media your avocation, it's not just a job, it's really something that you do for a lifetime, a lifestyle, and a living. Bias is something that you hate. You never want to be accused of bias.
Sure.
David Broder, who wrote a great book called Behind the Front Page, which is an absolute gem, very wise book about how the news is made, said bias is the greatest sin. You can't be biased. And you got to examine yourself for bias every story you write, every line you write.
Yeah.
You need to think about, well, where is my bias? You're never going to eliminate it, but you have to be conscious of it. So that is part of what's going on here. It breaks my heart is the idea that most people think we're all biased. And no, we're really trying not to be. But what's going up against that is this idea that it is a business. And especially in an internet age, it's all about clicks. It's all about eyeballs.
Sure. And
the confrontation, the kind of the over-the-top, bombastic headlines, and you put something out there, and then if there's a retraction later, you put it in the little fine print. That's part of this game of getting a bunch of clicks, and it really it has perverted the media has always been a business. It's always been a big business, but this idea that it's so instantaneous now has really hurt it. I think as a business, that's hurt the American consumer too, because the media should be trusted. It should be trusted more than it is.
It needs to be trusted.
I know many people in the media who are trying to do good work. They're trying to find truth. They're trying to hold everybody to account, whether they're left, right, or center. But this idea that because you want to be bombastic and the people in the management of these media companies want to get clicks, you're setting people against each other. It's not a good thing.
No, I agree 100%. It's all about that, and that really says a lot. All the headlines that says so-and-so destroys so-and-so, or click here to see, John Oliver annihilate so-and-so. It's like,
right.
What are we doing here, you know? And again, some of these shows, it's almost like closed off to conservatives now. I know my wife likes to watch some of them, and we watch some of them together and I actually predicted. I watched last week with John Oliver with my wife almost every week. But I told her, as we get closer to the election in 2016, this is 2 years ago, just to let you know, I'm telling you, he's going to get political.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to be able to sit here and watch this with you anymore. And sure enough,
this happened.
She's the one that caught it. She goes, I saw it, just don't even bother. And I said, okay.
It's like,
She knows. So.
Well, there's an old line, I think it was a very old line, obviously. I think it was from Jonathan Swift, who said that truth rumor flies and truth limps along behind.
That's right.
and it's so true in this. I mean, especially now in the internet age. I mean, there isn't that idea that you want to correct things. You know, you want to step forward and you want to say, hey, we got it wrong, you know. And you know, Trump's been hurt by it too. The problem that Trump has is that there's so much swirling around him coming from all sides in support and against him that I think the users, again, the viewers, the readers, don't know what to make of it either. And I think that Trump is trying to do things that are good things, what he perceives to be good things, what the Republican leaders in Congress and the Senate believe are good things.
Right.
You know, I think he's got good points. I think that tax reform is a good thing. You know, I think fewer regulations to a certain extent are good for business. I think you can go too far with that because I think a lot of regulations do help consumers. And I think a lot of the stuff is, and even I think the tax policy, the trade policy is good in a lot of ways. There's been a lot of chatter about this idea that does Trump have it wrong or right? I mean, this idea that he said, well, manufacturing, we've got to bring manufacturing jobs back, and manufacturing is going to be, you know, has really gotten hurt. And you know, there was a lot of thought in the Obama era that, well, those jobs are all, they're going to go away anyway because of automation, outsourcing, we can't compete. And now there's been a bit of a reappraisal of that, saying, well, you know what, maybe manufacturing is a little more important than the Democrats have given it credit for over these past decades or two. Maybe there are things we can do, maybe even through some tariffs, to help protect American workers, and then maybe that does make some sense.
Yeah, you know, I've always been a free market guy.
Me too.
So you know, in my gut, I'm against that type of protectionism, right? But you know, I think another, you know, to go back to the shows that you watch in the 60s and the 70s, and it's really great to look and see what side of this issue would I fall back then. Right. and then it's always very instructive to look at how it turned out. So maybe you know, the position that I would have taken back then was not the right one, and what can you learn from that, right? I don't consider myself you know, an expert on all issues. I know that I have strong beliefs and I'm passionate about my beliefs, but I'm willing to be persuaded otherwise. And I think everybody should keep an open mind. And you know, I know that he's taking a lot of heat on these tariffs and trade policy from my brethren on the right. And you know, you said it. You know, the President Obama said those jobs aren't coming back, and I don't know that that's true.
Maybe we gave up on them too easy. I mean, maybe that's possible. I mean, maybe the service and the transactional sectors are as important as they are. Maybe, you know, building stuff still does count, and it's still important for America.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, the idea that you go back and you look in history and how things have changed. I mean, first of all, I think a lot of people don't have enough appreciation for history and where we've come from and why. Right. But, you know, you look back in history and, you know, like Eisenhower would be a Democrat today, you know, and Hillary Clinton probably would have been a Republican way back when, right? I mean, it's Bill like, Clinton, right? You know, JFK, I mean, I think that to my mind, the country has moved to the right over the course of time, in my lifetime from the 60s until now, right? From my memory from the 70s until now. I mean, Reagan in his time was considered such a radical, bomb-throwing conservative. He doesn't look so conservative now, really, if you think about it, right? I mean, the tax change that he put forward, I think it was in '82, his tax plan was a radical change. It was actually a much bigger change in the tax code than what Trump put through last year. But, you know, you look back on that and you say, well, there's strong, compelling evidence that, tax breaks really do help the economy. I mean, you know, you want to support people that need support. You know, you need to have social programs. But, you know, those that are making the money and companies, corporations, well, you know, if you give some tax breaks to them, does it trickle down? There's some evidence that says it does, that does help the economy overall.
I'm glad to hear that, because I don't hear that from many folks. They say the direct opposite, though. We know now that this doesn't work.
I don't know. I mean, the evidence, I'm not an economist. I don't know. I just know what I read. And it seems, well, some of this goes back to why you believe government exists, right? I mean, those in the left will say, and again, I consider myself centrist, but I mean, I'm a left-leaning centrist, but I consider myself centrist. Those in the left will say government exists to help people, right?
Those on the right will say, in my opinion, that government exists to get the hell out of the way and let me have my liberty and my ability to succeed with the least possible restrictions. That's a very broad way of putting it. But to me, there's got to be a blend of that. I mean, we've tried things both ways. I mean, in the early part of the 20th century and before in America, there was like no restrictions on anything, man. I mean, there was no support for poor people other than churches. There was no restrictions on corporations. They could make anything dirty. They could rob. They could do anything they wanted, essentially. And then you had FDR come in, and there was this very wrenching change to very much more of a socialist framework. It had to be because we were in the middle of a Great Depression. So we tried it different ways, and I think what's come out of that as we got into the post-war World War II era was this idea that you need a blend.
Yeah.
You need to really let corporations make money. You need to let people invest in them and make money.
And create jobs.
You also need to support people. You need to pay taxes, and you need to support people that need support, whether they're poor or that they're struggling or whatever. Or just have a shot at going to college and have breaks to start their careers and start their life. Breaks on getting houses. I mean, all these things are socialistic pieces, where the government is giving people something, a handout, a little incentive, some help, tax break, not even tax breaks all the time, but just breaks to help you get going. So that blending is really important to me. And I think that's what's missing in the discourse is this idea that
From the right, you have to have dynamism to grow the economy and expand the economy. And from the left, you need to also devote some of those profits to helping people and helping people up. And then ultimately, that's going to lead to a better country for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not an absolutist in the right. In the right, there are ideas of the left that I consider helpful and
Like what? What would be some of the left?
Well, as you said, I'm not a guy who believes that no regulations is the way to go. I think that the labor unions had a great impact in our society, and I question how much they're valuable now as compared to in the past, and some of the and especially here in California, some of the positions that they take, that I disagree strongly with and think that it hurts the everyday California now. But there was certainly things that needed to be regulated and workers' rights and welfare programs. I don't believe in cutting people off of welfare, but I live by that old adage that you don't want it to you want it to be a safety net but not a hammock. And I learned very early when I first started right out of high school and college. I started doing some campaigns and trying to hire people to work in my campaigns, and I saw some pushback from folks that were unemployed, and I needed to give them more than a job. I needed to give them a reason for why they get off the couch and no longer collect that unemployment check. And so I think as you said, there needs to be a balance and sort of fine tune it and have it be well regulated. Or so I am in favor of, for example, having requirements if you're going to be on unemployment and welfare. I think you should be looking for a job. If you can't find a job, you should be serving your community in other ways. I believe unless you have skin in the game, that then you're not likely to want to make your life amount to anything. And I think, and that's to me is the saddest thing of all, is when I hear people when unemployment numbers come out and we talk about how many people have left the workforce. Like, that's to me is such a foreign idea that you there are of course circumstances that lead you to whether it's you get injured to a point where you can no longer work, or you're taking care of a dying family member. Sure. But if you're just leaving the workforce because I've tried for so long to get a job and I can no longer do it, so it's easier just
quitting.
To
pull a check every.
Like, you're quitting on your life, the way that I see it, and to me, I mean, that's what connects me the most. I think people find purpose in their life through their work and through their supporting their family or raising their family, and then when you take that away, I mean, what else is there, right?
And I agree with that. I agree with everything you just said. I think that incentives are good. I think people need to have dignity and respect and feel good about themselves and what they're doing. the Republicans have an issue now, a bit of a PR issue, I think, and the Democrats don't have any hesitation with hitting him over the head, that the party will edge towards cruelness in a certain sense. I mean, there's been chatter about cutting SNAP benefits or changing SNAP in a certain sense. There's this idea that the Republicans gleefully separate parents from children at the border when illegal or undocumented people come over. And I'm not saying that's true or false. I'm not making that point.
Sure.
I'm saying from the PR perspective, the Republicans are getting hit with these things. And I think that, I don't believe those things are all necessarily true, or even many of them are true. But certainly it's something that the Republicans have to address and account for. So how do you answer people that say to you, maybe who are liberal, and say, well, you support a heartless party, and you want to take food away from children who are struggling and whose parents are drug addicts, and you want to get them off of SNAP because of poor choices their parents made. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I would. I do think that there are some policies that our party struggles to communicate our message on. I believe, on the issue of parents being separated from their children at the border. I think that's I don't support that. And as an immigrant myself, I think that there are many other ways that we could handle that.
Is that being, just to be fair, is that story being framed incorrectly, or
yes, but there's truth to it, and,
okay.
and the way that it's being framed incorrectly is that this has been a policy that's been in place for years, right? I mean, this is just 2 weeks ago, I think every media outlet out there caught on to this wave of a photo of some kids sleeping behind what could just only be considered cages, right? And then they put that out there. This is Trump's America, right? Well, hold on. Right underneath the photo, the date is 2014. Right. So
no, it's Obama's
where
America.
was this outrage when it was happening under Obama? So, and this is where you see, conservatives just completely tune out, shrug, and say nothing matters, because they're never going to be held responsible for it. Well, so why should we? And that's where I think some of that perception of heartlessness comes from. I think most conservatives that I know want to see a solution to that problem. They don't want, parents being separated from their kids. I do think that there are many other ways. Our immigration system, I think, is a complete mess. Having gone through it and been an immigrant and gotten my green card and received my citizenship, I thought the process was a complete mess. It still is, and it's not the most humane it can be. And but we have gotten to a point where folks, are looking at it from the right, and as I said, so much of this issue has been misframed that they don't know what to believe anymore, and they just assume that these are lies, and that we just need to keep pushing on our tribalism and keep pushing in our direction, and not even trying to defend the policy itself. So now in the SNAP, I think that's a more complicated issue, and one where that's again one of those situations where I think you need to balance between not letting folks become too complacent in their own life, right? But I think by and large you'll find that the Republicans are in favor of feeding kids.
Yeah, of course.
That's just not something that we're against.
See, this is some of this devolves to the constituents. Some of this devolves to the voters. And I mean, Occam's razor says, well, the simplest explanation is usually the best one. You have to step back and say, well, do Republicans really not want to feed kids? I mean, I see some of these, and I see it on the right, from the right too. These ideas about what liberals want, this socialist paradise. Liberals want another Venezuela here in America. Who the heck would want Venezuela anywhere? We don't want a Venezuela in Venezuela, right? It's like, I mean, it's a failed system. I mean, it's like, again, I think it comes down to just wanting to get clicks, but some of it is the voter, the individual person has to sit there and think, is this logical? Does that really make sense? I mean, come on, these are my neighbors. Republicans are my neighbors. Democrats are my neighbors, my friends, my kids, my wife, whatever. I mean, we're all Americans. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody just yesterday, and this person is a Republican, and he didn't come right out and said this, but it was like the subtext was, well, you're not patriotic, Mike. You don't really feel the same way about the country that I do. And I was like, I love it. This is the greatest country in the world. This is the greatest country that's ever been in the world.
Yeah.
I'm such a patriot. You know, I mean, what I do, what I talk about, the things that are important to me come from a patriotic heart.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and it's like, sure, I want the government to try to do more to help people that are struggling. I might be struggling at some point. I'm doing okay now, but who knows? I mean, I might need some help, right? I mean, it's like, I want the government to support myself and my fellow citizens.
Yeah.
You know, there are things that governments on both sides, the Democrats as well as Republicans, have done that I haven't supported. But it doesn't mean I'm not a patriot. You know, I would never want to see a flag burned, or, you know, I mean, it's like, the flag should never be burned. People died for that flag, you
Right.
know? I had somebody hit me up on Facebook about that not too long ago. Well, you flag burning liberals, what are you talking about? What
burning hippie.
what is a flag being burned? But these are the things that you have these opinions, and it goes way before Trump.
Yeah,
It
that's
goes
the
way before
discourse we see today, and
Yeah.
I think it's deteriorated immensely. You know, I've read a lot about how discourse in general deteriorates during tough economic times. So and it has since 2008. It's gotten nastier and nastier, and you know, I don't think it's all because of the presidency of Barack Obama.
Well, but the economic times are pretty good right now, I think.
So I'm hoping
yeah.
that we'll get back to a place where we can have these conversations again.
Yeah. Well, I
But
mean, Trump's a lightning rod. I mean, you know, he's a lightning rod on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, there are certain people that you would never vote for Trump, and there's certain people that think they would want to vote for Trump for the rest of their lives. You know, he's very, very divisive, but he's got a lot of passion on both ends of the spectrum.
Well, yes, you know, and I don't blame people for being anti-Trump. You know, I think you know, Trump being this sort of unusual character that has sort of came into the political scene like you know, like a drop like a bomb. You know, it's upset a lot of people, and he's not somebody who is going to use the right words or be politically correct. And on the other side, as you said, you know, the thing that I see the most from Republicans that you know, you have your diehards no matter what, and let's just forget about them for a second, but everybody else, which I think is like 80% of the country, you know, they're in our side, on the Republican side. The reason why he's being so well received is not because he's some reality TV star. It's not because, you know, he was the host of The Apprentice or whatever. It's because for so long, when the media attacks Trump or when, you know, Democrats are attacking Trump, they feel that's personal because they don't feel they're attacking Trump. They feel like they're attacking all of them, and that's been the way for years. It's just Trump. It was you know, any candidate, Mitt Romney and John McCain, George Bush,
yeah, no doubt.
and you know, people take politics really personally, and it's the same on the left. I assume, you know, and so we need to be a little bit more respectful and a little bit more I don't know, just calm and collected in the ways that we talk to our, you know, you wouldn't talk that way about, you know, with your neighbor. So when Trump responds in the way that he does, the people that for so long have not had a champion to defend not Trump but defend them are finally feeling like they have a voice, like, oh my God, I'm not all alone trying to defend my positions anymore. It's, you know, we finally have somebody willing to push back.
So you are a young guy. You're obviously very well spoken. You know, you have that aura, that appeal. But you've been in California. You like it here in California.
I love it.
Give any thoughts to moving to Washington? Maybe getting involved in the game on a federal level?
You know, I've over the years, over the past 10, 12 years that I've been working in California politics, I've had many friends move away. I mean, the majority of my friends that were here when I started are gone. And it wasn't by choice. It was by circumstance, you know, and whether it be the high cost of living in the state or it's usually not, because if you're moving to Washington, D.C., that's not that's not any cheaper. That's not the reason you're leaving.
Right.
But it was a lot about, you know, how difficult it is to be a conservative, how difficult it is to be a Republican in California. I've lived in most of the areas that I've lived in California have been liberal. You know, lived in Southern California, and I lived in Sacramento, Davis, Chico's a liberal town, and you know, I've always been able to make friends and try to, as hard as I can, keep the politics away. You know, working in politics, I'm sort of tired and done of talking about politics when I go home. So,
Exactly.
so you know, I've had many opportunities to go to Washington D.C. You know, one of the first times that I visited Washington D.C. was for that Crossfire taping. It was a taping that they were doing in D.C. and you know, love D.C. Great place to visit. You know, I don't know that I could ever live there. And I've had some opportunities in the past few years to go and do so. I have friends that work in the Trump administration and really wanted me to go out there. And for me, it's, you know, California is where my family is, where my wife's family is. It's where I've been for the past 15 years plus. And as much as I can, I'd like to stay here and hopefully help, you know, try to help, you know, fix the state a little bit, you know, in my small capacity as an activist for my views, you know. So no, I you know, Chico, California is my home for the foreseeable future. And
Washington's great. I mean, I grew up on the East Coast. I've been in Washington many times, and Washington's a great city. I mean, and it's, you know, and like Georgetown, you know, I mean, I don't know how big of a house you would need. I mean, you could get a beautiful 2-bedroom, 2-bath in Georgetown, nice little brownstone. That's like $3.5 million. It's not really that bad. It's really nice. You know, you might even get a parking spot,
right.
You know, maybe, if you're lucky.
Maybe I can live in a parking spot.
There you go. You
That's
can live in a
as you'll
parking
be able
spot
to
too.
afford.
That would be it as well. We got a couple minutes left. And we had a fun today, so thank you for this. But before I let you go, what do you the average voters, we talked about some inside baseball stuff today.
Sure.
What do you wish that the average voter knew about the process? What do you wish that they knew about the work that your boss does, that Jim Nielsen does, or any other legislator, lawmaker does every day that affects that voter's life?
Well, when we have interns go through our office, I always ask them on their when we were sending them off for greener pastures. We take them out to lunch, and I ask them, "So what have you learned?" And almost every single time, the answer seems to be, you know, how surprised they are by what the work of a legislator is, and they didn't know that so much of our efforts goes to just helping, you know, constituents resolve their issues with state agencies and or whatever. You know, if somebody calls us on an issue that we have no jurisdiction over, but wait a second, here's Congressman LaMalfa's office, and they'll help you out with it. You know, and in the state level, we work together with the state assemblyman, you know, James Gallagher's office, and we sort of tag team issues, and we try to serve the constituents that way. So there's a lot that I think most folks, unless they've had a personal experience, like they've really struggled to get a response from a state agency, and they finally got to us, and we have more of a direct line to them, and we can help them resolve some of these issues. Unless they've actually had that experience with us, they don't know. They just think that you know, legislators are just running around and going to receptions and you know, standing up there on the floor of the Senate or the Assembly and, you know, talking about whatever it is that they want to talk about, and then going home and collecting paychecks or something like that. No, I think by and large, legislators, you know, have it in their heart to serve their constituents. That's been my experience. I can't speak for every legislator, and I know for a fact that some of them don't have that as their priorities. You know, some of them have been indicted over the years, and but by and large, I think that they're not in it just for their personal interest. They're in it, you know, for to serve the public. There's a higher calling, as they say, and that they believe that their skills can be used to help people. And so that's I think what most folks miss, is that, you know, we're there to help, and to the best extent that we can. And if we can't, we'll let you know. This is outside of something that I can do. And so that would be my message is, you know, talk to them, call them, you know, call your legislator's office and ask for help, because a lot of the times we can help.
That's great. Well, Saulo Londono, thanks for joining us again today.
Of course.
This was awesome. We're going to have you back on the show again. It's always a good conversation with you.
Thank you.
Kind of a little
pleasure.
crossfire ourselves here. That's always a good thing. We like that. Well, that's our show for today. Thanks again for joining us. We appreciate Saulo for joining us also. Don't forget, NorCal News Now, of course, is available wherever you download your podcast, so check us out there and subscribe. We can also be found on Facebook at NorCal News Now, where you can post your comments and suggestions for upcoming podcast topics and guests. So thanks to all of you for joining us and listening in. We'll be back at you soon with another episode of NorCal News Now. So long.